Sunday evening, 7 p.m., June 12th, 1977. The evening before there was a massive thunderstorm. The girls of Tent 8 were huddled together in an attempt to brave the storm as a group. Lori Lee Farmer, age 8, Doris Denise Milner, age 10, and Michelle Hunter Guse, age 9. Someone was in the woods. Moaning and animal sounds can be heard from the tree line. The girls are stricken with fear. Now 6 a.m., June 13th, a camp counselor made her way to the shower to conduct her normal routine. What she saw outside of Tent 8 would destroy the lives of 3 families, countless children, and counselors from here on out. 3 children left for a wonderful camping trip with friends, not knowing they would never return. Welcome to Find Me in the Dark, a podcast covering all things true crime. This is episode 3, The Girl Scout Murders of 1977. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Find Me in the Dark. I am your host, Eric Phillips, along with my co-host, Robert Prestich.
What's going on, guys?
We got a wild one. Today. Yeah, I mean, this one's brutal. All of them, have been pretty,
Yeah, but
crazy.
This one's especially sad.
Yeah, this one's sad. So we'll warn you, as we usually do. But this one is different. This one involves the sexual assault and murder of young children. So, if that's not your thing, which it shouldn't be, if it is your thing, go turn yourself into the police right now because you are a nutcase.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude, this is a really sad story. We did a lot of research on this, and I think this is the only one that we've written that it actually
Brought us to tears.
Really, disturbed us. Yeah, if you're a mother or a father, this one's especially hard to listen to.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't easy to get through.
Yeah, not at all. Also, we have a micro episode out on Patreon right now, so there is a link to it.
Yeah, on our Facebook page.
On our Facebook, so you can
or
sign up.
It's Patreon/Find Me in the Dark.
Yeah, so if you want to sign up for it, I think if you do the $5 one, you get the episode a day early, and then if you do the $10 one, you get the episode a day early plus a 10-minute episode or 15-minute episode. I think this one's actually almost 20 minutes because there's just a lot more information than we thought there was.
I do want to shout out the new Patreon members that we do have. Eric Wright, Rhonda Cisco, Ariel Thompson, Jonathan Yunkel, and Josh Bessler. Thank you, guys. It really means a lot to us that you're spending your hard-earned money on us.
Yeah. We support any, support.
Toilet paper's expensive.
I meant we appreciate any support. But, it's just really cool that people, think our content is worth it.
Yeah, man, it's super exciting for us. It definitely keeps us going for sure.
Well, we never thought that a hobby, that people would actually like it.
Right.
So anyways, we're going to go ahead and get started on this case. It's a long one, so get ready for it. And, like I said, it's brutal. So, if you want to skip this one, I don't blame you. Just make sure that you pretend you listen to it so we can get,
At least put a like.
Yeah, put a 5-star.
Yeah, there you go.
Even though, all right, here we go.
Camp Scott opened its doors in 1928, located in the Cookson Hills near Locust Grove, in between the southwestern margin of the Ozark Plateau and the Boston Mountains of Arkansas. This area was previously a part of the Cherokee Nation until 1907, when Oklahoma became a state. The camp was built as a Girl Scout retreat, meant to be a place of peace and fun for the Scouts to enjoy their summers. This all changed in 1977, when Camp Scott went from a safe, child-friendly place to spend your summer to the scene of a murder so horrific it would devastate the community forever.
Leading up to the summer of 1977, less than 2 months before the upcoming Scout retreat, the camp held an on-site training session for the faculty and counselors that would be overseeing the girls that summer. During their time at the training session, the counselors started to notice strange things happening on the campgrounds. Many of the tents had been ransacked and things were going missing. This was not out of the ordinary, since the camp was in the middle of nowhere and frequently had squatters occupying the tents during the off-season. On one occasion, one of the counselors noticed someone had been in their cabin. The cabin was turned completely upside down, and a previously full box of donuts was now completely empty, besides a disturbing note that read somewhere along the lines of, "We are on a mission to kill 3 girls in Tent 1. The counselor took the note as an extremely inappropriate joke and never reported it to her superiors. If only she knew what would come to be in the near future, she would realize what a massive mistake not reporting this note turned out to be. Yeah, man, this is like a super big mistake, in my opinion. I mean, how often when you're at a camp, do you get
a note saying that you're going to kill people?
How do you not take that seriously? I mean, how...
It was 1977.
I don't get the joke. What's the joke? What's the joke? Is threatening girls funny?
No.
Threatening little girls funny, not. Dude? I mean, maybe just the note I could see. Like, oh man, these other counselors are messing with me, trying to get me scared. But the fact that everything was being ransacked and there was like evidence of all this stuff going missing and that people were like at the camp that didn't work there, like that's a problem, man. I mean, there's...
Well, I know they had said something about, in the note, talked about aliens or something like that, too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, maybe that's why they kind of passed it off.
Maybe. But
but they also don't know exactly what was said on that note because it was crumpled up and thrown away.
Right. And you did make a good point that it is the 70s. Yeah. And people are like, hey, we're going to kill these 3 girls. Like, you guys, come on, man. What a bunch of goofy dudes, Oh, I'm going to kill these girls. Oh, no big deal, Let's go smoke some weed about it.
Right.
But yeah, dude. Yeah, that's serious, man. I really can't believe that they did not report that. I would have reported that immediately. You know what I mean? Yeah, even if it was a joke.
Right. I mean, you have
to. Just say something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's it. Just say something. So we're going to get into the girls heading to camp. The date is June 12th, 1977. It's early in the morning, and the girls are oozing with excitement as they hug and kiss their families goodbye. They proceed to bounce with joy as they board the bus that will take them to their 2-week retreat to Camp Scott. There were over 20 scouts on this trip, and all of them had been looking forward to this trip for weeks. None of the girls had ever met each other, so they were all looking forward to forming new friendships. After the bus arrives at the campground, the girls are directed to form a group of campers that they will be spending the remainder of the retreat with. 3 girls, Lori Lee Farmer, age 8, Doris Denise Milner, age 10, and Michelle Hunter Guse, age 9. They were all assigned to Tent 8 in the Camp Kiowa unit. Tent 8, Kiowa?
Yep.
Sorry about that, Kiowa unit. Tent 8 was located 240 feet from the nearest counselor's cabin and was blocked by the building where the showers were, making it the most isolated tent in the camp.
The camp itself was extremely large, 410 acres of open land that was surrounded by dense woods. The camp was fenced in, but the fence was poorly maintained and was unable to keep anyone in or out. At approximately 7 p.m. that evening, the counselors and the scouts were told to seek shelter due to a massive incoming thunderstorm. The girls were scared, but were attempting to comfort each other through the storm by writing letters to their families about their experience on the first day of summer camp. Yeah, man, so this camp is huge. That's a big camp.
410 acres.
Yeah, and there's not, like, I know it seems like there's a lot of girls, but there's not. When you consider breaking them up into different tents, and they're so widespread, and the fact that there's a tent that far away
and then hidden,
yeah. Like, hey man, at least be able to see all of them. Like, that's insane. And then the fence, like, dude, you knew weeks before that somebody had been on the campgrounds that wasn't supposed to be there, that was leaving notes saying they're going to kill girls. Like, dude, fix the fence, man. Let's make it a little bit more secure for these little girls coming here.
Well, I know when I went to camp when I was a child, we always had our counselor inside a tent with us.
Yeah.
We had our own.
Right, yeah. That's usually how it is. You have to have an adult. But all these people are, like, sleeping together in a tent.
I guess times were different in 1977.
Dude, I agree. Yeah, I know that. I mean, they were like, who cares about that note? It'll cost like $80 to fix that fence, and we're not going to do that. But yeah, like you said, I mean, 1970s were a little bit looser. You know what I mean? Like, people, didn't even think about that stuff, which they should have, because 1970s is serial killer central, bro. Like, you got Bundy, everybody, man. Everybody in the 70s. BTK was operating. The Zodiac was still doing stuff. I mean, everybody. But I guess this is, an isolated area, so they're not super worried about it. But, yeah, I mean, they could have prepared better, dude. They could have done a lot more to try and, protect these kids. But
yeah, we're gonna talk about that now, actually.
Yeah, let's do that.
All right. So between 8 p.m. and 10 p.m., a counselor from the Comanche unit, located just outside of the Kiowa unit, witnessed something strange in the woods directly surrounding the camp. There was a dim amber light that was slowly moving through the woods. The counselor stares for a moment to make sure what she is seeing is real. The light continues to float through the tree line, and then as quickly as it came, it disappeared into darkness. At 10 p.m., a Kiowa counselor, D. Elder, does a routine tent check, but she sees nothing out of the ordinary. The night is quiet, and all the girls are accounted for, so she returns to her cabin and goes to sleep. Deeper into the evening, the scouts of Tent 7 see a light slowly approaching them, cutting through the blackness of the summer night. The light is directly upon the tent. It illuminates the tent, showing the fear frozen in the faces of the young girls. The shadow of a man is in the doorway. He shines his light directly into the tent, closes the flap, and then disappears into the silence.
Fast forward to midnight. Camp counselor Carla Wilhite hears campers laughing and talking around the latrine. She makes her way to the girls and orders they get back to their assigned tents. Throughout the night, the campers continuously heard strange and unsettling noises. Some described them as moaning, while others said they heard unusual animal-like sounds coming from the woods. Along with the noises coming from the trees, there were also many accounts of a girl being heard in the distance crying for her mother. At 1:30 a.m., Carla awakes to giggling coming from Tent 6. She yells at the girls to quiet down and shines her flashlight at the tent. Both Carla and Dee walk over to Tent 6 to tell the girls that it's quiet time, and none of them should be awake at this hour. On the way back to the cabin, Dee and Carla start to hear strange noises echoing through the woods behind Tents 1 and 2. The noises were described as low, guttural, animal noises, but not an animal that either of them had ever heard before. Something was happening at Camp Scott, something so devastating, nobody could have possibly been prepared. There's so many warning signs, man. There's so many signs that something's going on, and I don't understand how nobody is taking it seriously.
I mean, they are little kids.
Not the counselors.
Well, yeah, you're right.
I mean, the counselors are hearing stuff in the woods too, and nobody's doing anything. I mean, if you put everything together, the cabins being ransacked, the tents being ransacked, if you're, walking through the camp and you hear something in the woods, it's probably time to say something, No,
I agree with you 100%. It's... man, I don't know. They like I said, I mean, they might be scared, scared themselves.
Yeah.
I mean,
but guess what? You took the job. You're in charge. And these little girls, what are they supposed to do, man?
Yeah, but the counselors are still pretty much kids themselves, too.
Yeah, I mean, they're literally supposed to be in charge.
Right, I agree.
You know, and these kids, what are they supposed to do when they see a guy in the tent door shining a light on him?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know what I would do.
I don't either. It's, you know, scary, especially, I mean, even for an adult, it's scary. And to think about 7 and 8 and 9-year-old girls seeing that stuff, you can't imagine how they felt about that. That's really scary. So it's now 6 a.m. on the morning of June 13th. Carla wakes to a beautiful morning. The smell of the previous night's rain is still in the air. She begins her walk to the showers, and that is when she notices something out of the ordinary on the campground. There is a sleeping bag lying on the ground in the middle of the camp, about 150 yards away from Tent 8. She stops dead in her tracks. Carla can tell something is wrong. She continues towards the sleeping bag, and what she finds is truly grotesque. It was the badly beaten body of a clearly deceased Doris Milner, lying just outside of her sleeping bag. Carla's screams shatter the Oklahoma morning silence. In an act of panic, instead of checking Doris for signs of life, Carla immediately runs to wake up fellow counselors, Dee and Susan, to do a head count on the remainder of the children at the camp. Dee starts at 10-8, where she quickly confirms that all 3 girls are missing.
Carla rushes to the nurse's station to get medical assistance for the one known casualty. As the nurse drives to camp, Carla runs to wake the camp directors, Barbara and Richard Day, to inform them of the situation. The nurse arrives at the body. She quickly realizes that there's no life left in Doris Milner. Doris had massive head trauma. She was left badly beaten, nude from the waist down, and her legs spread, and her hands still bound behind her back. Richard arrives shortly after the nurse. While the nurse attends to Doris, Richard discovers the bodies of Michelle Guse and Lori Farmer, still inside their sleeping bags, lying on the ground, only feet away from Doris.
Upon further investigation, it was found that Doris and Michelle were both bound and gagged, while Lori was not. In my opinion, this is evidence that Lori was the first to be killed, while Michelle and Doris were gagged to assure their silence. While the nurse and Richard attended to the newly discovered bodies, covering Doris with her sleeping bag, Barbara Day went back to her cabin to contact Harold Berry, a highway patrol officer, to inform him of the atrocity unfolding at Camp Scott.
The rest of the camp counselors were set with the difficult task of damage control. Some of the counselors told the children that a pipe had burst, while others told campers that someone was very sick. They tried everything in their power to keep the rest of the scouts calm by doing activities with the girls until the buses arrived to take them back to Tulsa. The parents were all informed that there had been an accident and that they would need to pick up their children early. The parents of Doris, Michelle, and Lori were all contacted and told that there had been an accident at camp. Later, the camp staff and authorities held a meeting with the girls' parents, ultimately telling them their children had died at camp. It was only later, when the media published the story, that their parents found out that the girls had been murdered at the summer camp.
Man, could you imagine having to find out through the media?
The media?
Like you're having meetings with with the camp officials, and they're telling you that, there had been an accident, and your girls aren't coming home. They're sorry about that. Like at least give them the information.
Yeah.
Be real with them, dude. Because
I couldn't imagine.
And hey,
I could not imagine that.
No, and it's not an accident. There was no accident.
Right.
Those girls were purposely killed. So the fact that they have to find out by the media is just truly sickening, man. I hate that. I hate thinking about that. Let's go over the crime scene and the evidence. Harold Berry was the first law enforcement officer on the scene. Harold admits that he kept the crime scene directly around the girls relatively untouched. Harold has also commented saying that due to the size of the camp and the amount of the scouts that had been accounted for and escorted to the buses, that the general scene was not fully secured until much later in the day, as was reported to the Mays County Sheriff, Pete Weaver, who was the one heading the investigation into the newly discovered murders. Due to the scene not being secured, there was a lot of evidence that could have been essential in solving these murders that is now rendered useless due to the countless people trampling the campground.
In 1977, DNA science was in such a stage of infancy that it was almost useless as evidence in solving crimes. After the bodies of and the immediate crime scene was secured, the authorities expand their investigation to tent number 8. Upon further investigation, the police believed that the suspect or suspects approached from the backside of the tent and unhooked the flaps to gain entry. Judging by the blood splatters on the wall and on the floor, investigators concluded that Lori and Michelle were both bludgeoned to death, and both were sexually assaulted. There was clear evidence that the suspect had attempted to clean up the crime scene with a bed sheet, but was unsuccessful, leaving a single boot print measured to be a men's size 9.5. There was also a second footprint found at the scene. This was from a tennis shoe and was found to be much smaller, around size 7.5. Doris had been bound and her mouth stuffed using a pre-made gag, and her body was brought to where all 3 bodies were eventually found.
There were multiple items that were found at the scene and immediately put into evidence. The items found are as follows: a red flashlight with a single fingerprint on it, filled with crumpled newspaper to hold the battery in place, a crowbar, black duct tape, nylon rope, and a long black hair. The items were traced back to a local farm located only a mile outside of camp, owned by a man named Jack Schroff. Jack was immediately a suspect, but upon further investigation, he was able to supply an alibi for the night of the murders and also passed a voluntary lie detector test. Along with Jack, Richard Day and Camp Ranger Ben Woodward were also cleared and no longer considered suspects in the murder. Upon clearing the camp staff, Sheriff Weaver discovered a new suspect based on the man's past crimes and whose mother lived a mile from the camp, Gene Leroy Hart. Hey, let's take a quick break so I can tell you about this place called Harbor Brewing Company in Winthrop Harbor, Illinois. We are opening a lakefront beer garden at North Point Marina this spring. It will offer local beers and spirits from all over Lake County, a stunning view of the lake, and a huge outdoor German-style beer garden. It's in the back of the main admin building in 701 North Point Drive, Winthrop Harbor, Illinois.
Gene Hart had an extensive and lengthy police record, with crimes such as raping 2 pregnant women after tying them up and covering their faces with tape and then driving them into the middle of nowhere and then leaving them to die. Luckily, both women survived, and the other woman was able to break free to get help. One of the victims said that during the rape, Gene was completely out of control, and he was making strange, yet intense animalistic growling noises. While on parole for this crime, Hart vanished. He was later arrested after committing a burglary while on the run. Hart committed 3 burglaries total, and in each case, the victims were asleep in the house, one of the victims being a female police officer. After his capture, Hart admitted he was guilty of the rapes and burglaries, and in 1970 was sentenced to over 300 years in prison.
In 1973, Hart successfully escaped prison by jumping off the roof. He was recaptured only 11 days later. Shortly after his first escape, Hart escaped once again by sawing his way through the prison bars. After his multiple escapes from prison, the legend of Gene Hart began to grow. Gene was a Cherokee, and many of his fellow tribesmen believed he had supernatural powers and was able to shapeshift, which is a common theme in Native American lore. In many people's eyes, this is the true reason he was able to escape so effortlessly, earning him the nickname of the Sandman. In fact, some of law enforcement officers have made claims that while they are on Camp Scott grounds, they are frequently followed by a mysterious black dog that seems to vanish into thin air. Many of the Cherokee tribespeople believe this dog to be Gene Hart. There are still sightings of this dog on the property to this very day.
In the midst of the investigation, there were multiple tips from locals about caves in the area where Hart could possibly be hiding. Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigations agent Arthur Linville came upon a cave, which we will refer to as Cave Number 1, where he discovered some extremely strange items, such as a pair of red underwear, a picture of 2 women, a newspaper, a roll of duct tape that matched the tape found at the scene of the murders, a roll of masking tape with a piece of plastic attached to it that had the end torn off that matched perfectly with the tape used to cover the lens of the flashlight, and a pair of glasses. In fact, these were very specific pair of glasses. They belonged to a counselor at Camp Scott, Susan Emery, and had been reported missing only days before the murders.
The newspaper in Cave 1 was in fact the other half of the very same newspaper that was pulled out of the red flashlight at Camp Scott. In an attempt to find the identity of the women featured in the photo, the picture was published nationwide in hopes that someone would recognize them, and in fact, someone did. A man came forward and said that while mainly he was a prison guard, he also was a wedding photographer on the side, and he was certain that those were pictures that he had taken and Hart had developed while being in a photography class in prison. What makes all of these pieces of evidence more damning is the fact that cave number 1 was within walking distance from Camp Scott and Hart's mother's home. 2 weeks after the murders, a farmer reported seeing Gene walking on the hillside near his property.
Agent Harvey Pratt went to further investigate this sighting and discovered a formation of 4 fires and cigarette butts outside what we will be calling cave number 2. Pratt, being a Cherokee himself, noticed the formation of the fires, the type of cedar being used, and the fact the filter had been ripped off of every cigarette was a good implication that this was a site of a Native American smoke ritual. The cigarette butts were swiftly sent out for blood testing and all came back as type O negative, which is the exact same blood type as Gene Hart. Also found at the ritual site outside of cave number 2 was a very clear outline of a boot print that matched the size of the print that was found outside of tent number 8. Later in the investigation, a prisoner confided in the police, telling them that he had met with Hart at what we will be calling cave number 3 after the murders. Etched into the wall of cave number 3 was a horrifying message that read, 77-6-17, the killer was here. Bye-bye, fools.
In the weeks following the murders, a security company was hired at Camp Scott to oversee the property while law enforcement was collecting evidence. Many of the security officers claimed that someone was still out there, stalking Camp Scott. They found fresh footprints on the grounds, and doors that were previously shut were now mysteriously opened. Multiple officers claimed that a silhouette of a man could still be seen in the darkness of the dense woods surrounding the camp. The security team would frequently use dogs in an attempt to track the silhouette when it was spotted in the woods, only to have the animal return, shaken and in pain, as if it had been struck in the head.
The guards began leaving threads tied between trees surrounding the camp to make sure what they thought they were witnessing was in fact real, only to find the threads had snapped in half, verifying their deepest fear. Someone was still in the woods. During the ongoing investigation, the security team was using the Great Hall at the camp as headquarters. One day after making their rounds on the camp, searching for the intruder, the team returned to the hall to find a bag that had been left by the door that contained a pair of pink socks and tennis shoes, with the name Denise Milner inside. The contents of the bag were still soaking wet. Doris, Denise's mother, confirms that the shoes and socks found in the bag were in fact her daughter's.
Man, I don't even know what to say about that.
Bro.
Like, that's so crazy. I mean, to have, Gene, or, he's on the run or whatever, and somebody is still in the woods, right? I mean...
Yeah, that's it's super creepy.
I think that, in my opinion, points to there being more than one guy doing this.
I definitely agree with that too. I've thought that since we started researching this.
Yeah, what I want to know is, what are they gaining from stalking the camp still? Are they just using fear, like just trying to scare these people, or?
Honestly, I think it's fun for them.
Or is it like
enjoying
a Green River Killer type thing where he likes going back to the scene of the crime
I think that's
doing
exactly
that?
what it is.
He gets off on it. Yeah, that probably is it. That probably is it.
It's terrifying.
And the problem with all the evidence that they've got, there's nothing really physical. It's all circumstantial right now. The flashlight, the tape, and stuff like that. Like, it's not. You can't build a case around it, really. I mean, you can, but good luck getting a conviction. Right. I mean, you better be certain 100% with that stuff that you can pin it on this guy and put him away for this crime.
Yeah, but finding shoes when you go walking, if you come back, I mean, that is, like I said, terrifying.
Yeah, man, that's sick. Whoever's doing it is sick as hell, because putting those shoes and I know the cops said that they couldn't really confirm that it was her shoes, but her mom swears up and down, like, yeah, that's my daughter's shoes. You know what I mean? Like,
even if they weren't, though.
Even if they weren't, that's some weird stuff to be doing, man.
I don't know, man.
Like, hey.
I don't think I could have stayed there.
Is this a 80s horror movie? Because that's what it seems like.
For real.
You walk back to the, when there's some shit sitting on the door, a bag, and you just open it up and it's baby shoes. Hey, guess what I'm doing? Out.
I mean, we're pretty large individuals.
Yeah, I don't give a shit.
But, yeah,
I can't,
I'm gone.
What am I going to do? Fight a skinwalker?
Yeah, for real.
I don't care how big you are, dude. If he turns into a wolf, you are screwed.
Yeah, I'm out of here. For sure.
That's so scary, dude. The fact that somebody, a man, just to see a silhouette. Like, why aren't any of you leaving? You're a security team in the 70s. What are you getting paid? 79 cents an hour?
Yeah, you couldn't pay me enough, man.
Right?
There's no way.
No. There's absolutely no way.
I'd be scared of my old shadow at that point.
Yeah, dude.
You know?
Yeah, I'm not walking around that camp with somebody in the woods.
Absolutely not.
No. After 10 months of Gene being on the run, an informant with ties to the Cherokee community that had been working closely with the OSBI informed the agents that Hart was hiding out with a locally known medicine man named Sam Pigeon in a 3-room shack located only 50 miles east of Camp Scott. Pigeon told the authorities that he believed Hart to be completely innocent and had allowed him to live with him for 8 months in an attempt to avoid him being falsely accused. On April 6th, 1978, the OSBI surrounded the shack and were able to bring Hart into custody. As Agent Larry Bowles was handcuffing Gene Hart, he said, "You killed those little girls, didn't you?" Gene stared back at him and quietly replied, "You'll never pin it on me." That was the extent of Hart's communication with law enforcement. After months upon months of being on the run, Hart was finally apprehended and charged with the murders of the 3 girls. Despite being accused of such heinous crimes, the Native American community rallied around Hart in an act of solidarity, claiming he was 100% innocent. While the Native American community was supportive of Hart, a large portion of citizens did not believe his claims of innocence. The trial was a giant media circus and brought massive attention to a county that up until then was happily unknown. The support for Hart was so strong that over 400 people showed up to a fundraiser to help raise money for his defense.
During the first search of Sam Pigeon's shack, the police found nothing regarding the case. Later on, they decided it would be best to conduct a second sweep of the shack to ensure they didn't miss anything. This is when they found a pipe and a mirror that the counselor reported missing before the camping retreat began. This only strengthened Hart's many supporters. They now made claims that since there was nothing found on the first search, but then all of a sudden found items directly linked to the crime scene on the second search, that this evidence had clearly been planted in an attempt to frame Hart. The trial began in March 1979, where there were 110 jurors that were interviewed, which led to 6 men and 6 women being selected, not a single one of them being Native American.
During the trial, the state called 32 witnesses, one of them being Larry Dry. Larry claimed that after he and Hart camped out in the cave where the evidence for the murders was found, he started to receive threatening letters from an anonymous person saying that if he told anyone where Hart was hiding, his wife and daughter would be in great danger. Hundreds of people gathered outside the courthouse, waiting for hours in a hope to get a seat. One of the victims' mothers commented on the atmosphere of the courthouse, saying she felt as if though she was the enemy.
During the trial, a jailhouse informant testified that Hart had told him he was stoned and drinking wine for 3 days, when he woke up in the cave, covered in blood, unsure if he had killed the girls. The prosecution also pointed out that Hart would have had a firm understanding of the layout of Camp Scott, seeing as his childhood home was within walking distance. The prosecution had mostly circumstantial evidence, but there was a small amount of physical evidence. A hair found on Doris Milner's body that was tested and compared by forensic experts to the hair taken from the head of Gene Hart, and was found that both strands of hair were microscopically similar. While they were found to be similar, this does not 100% prove that the hair found on the crime scene belonged to Hart.
There was sperm found at the crime scene, but his supporters argued that Hart previously had a vasectomy, so it would be impossible for the sperm to belong to him. The prosecution argued that Hart's vasectomy was not 100% successful, and medical experts stated that partially successful vasectomies could result in non-productive and deformed sperm. Coincidentally, the sperm collected from the crime scene was non-productive, deformed, and from a non-white male. On top of the deformed sperm, Hart was a secretor with type O blood. The number of people in the United States that met all of this criteria was 0.002%. While there was a significant amount of evidence pointing towards Hart as the culprit, there was also a good amount of evidence pointing towards the contrary. The boot print found at the scene was thought to be around a size 9.5, making it much smaller than the 11.5 that Hart's lawyer claimed that he wore.
The fingerprint found on the flashlight used in the murders did not match Hart. This was the only fingerprint found at the murder site. The problem regarding the flashlight is that it is assumed to be stolen. so the investigators can't be positive if the print belongs to the culprit or the previous owner of the flashlight. The defense rested, with Hart never taking the stand. Only 10 days after opening arguments, the jury began the deliberation process. They went all of day one without a conclusion, but when they resumed the next day, they were ready within 30 minutes to pass down the unanimous verdict of not guilty. The courtroom erupted with cheers and applause. While Hart was found not guilty of these murders, he was still set to serve his life sentences for his previous burglaries.
On June 4th of 1979, Gene Hart died from a heart attack in prison. 2 of the victims' families filed a civil suit against the Magic Empire Council of Girl Scouts and its insurer for the amount of $5 million, claiming negligence on behalf of the camp and its staff. The jurors settled in favor of the Scouts. Regardless of the outcome, Camp Scott never opened its doors again.
All right, so we're going to talk about some other suspects that possibly could have done this.
Yeah, man, there's some pretty interesting ones, reading all these. Definitely, I don't know, makes you think about it.
Yeah, for sure. So Bill Stevens was 22 years old at the time of the murders. There was some speculation that Bill was the actual murderer of the 3 girls. Witnesses gave testimony at the trial, saying Stevens came to their home on the day of the murders with visible scratches on his arms and red stains on his boots. The witnesses also claimed that the flashlight found at the scene was in fact theirs and that Stevens had borrowed it. The witnesses also claimed that Stevens told her that he had killed the girls in midst of a Vietnam War flashback. He stated that he had cased the camp and learned its layout before murdering the girls. Later, Stevens beat and raped a female teacher, landing him in prison for life.
Eventually, Stevens' alibi of being at work during the time of the murders was confirmed. His boss was able to present a canceled paycheck and a time card to support Bill's claims. Later, the witnesses that testified Stevens had confessed to the murders recanted the statements completely, eventually being charged with perjury. In 1984, Bill Stevens was stabbed to death in his cell in the Kansas City State Penitentiary at the age of 27.
Carl Lee Myers was a convicted murderer and child rapist. John Russell, a former convict, was said to be making a film about the Girl Scout murders, in which he claims that while he and Myers were cell neighbors, Carl confessed to killing the girls. Russell relayed this information to the OSBI, which they claimed to have followed up on the lead. Myers died of natural causes in 2013 while on death row for a murder he committed in 1996. There is no evidence linking him to this crime.
An unknown truck driver from West Memphis testified during the trial that he was questioned 5 times about his whereabouts during the murder. Other than the record of his testimony at the trial, there is no evidence tying him to the crimes. There are many people that believe that this suspect is more important than the prosecution led to believe. There are theories that the West Memphis 3 and Girl Scout murders were committed by the same person, seeing as there are multiple similarities between the crimes. 3 victims that were hogtied, sexually assaulted, beaten, and murdered, and many believe this man to be the culprit.
Ricky Green was a suspect that confessed to the OSBI, stating that he and 2 other men committed the murders while they were high on drugs. The OSBI ruled Green out as a suspect due to failing 5 polygraph tests after his confession. Many people think his confession was glossed over due to the OSBI wanting to pin this murder on Hart and that the polygraph tests hold no water due to Green being on drugs during the murder, which would cause him to forget details, resulting in him failing the test.
Yeah, man, so that's the extra suspects. Man, those are all really interesting. There's
that West Memphis 3 one is...
That West Memphis 3 one is crazy. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of similarities to it, but I don't know, man.
I mean, I don't really think it is, but I mean, I can see where people think.
Well, yeah, people would have to look more into the West Memphis 3 case, which I think one of their stepdads did it, in my opinion. You know, man, I wish they... the DNA evidence was a little bit more prevalent on the murder victims and at the crime scene, so they could actually pin this on somebody. I think Hart is obviously the best suspect.
I think Hart definitely was involved. I think there was one other person, at least one other.
Yeah, I do too, because the fact that the bodies were so far away from the tent, and I
mean, how are you going to take 3 people without anybody hearing?
Yeah, 3 trips with nobody hearing you do any of it. I mean, nobody heard you do anything. And it's such a long distance to be, you'd have to drag 3 bodies without anybody seeing you. And, yeah, I just don't think that's possible, man.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, either way, I mean, it's a tragic case.
Yeah, super sad. Yeah, I don't know, man. But let's do our closing statement. What do you say?
Yeah. Thank you guys for listening. I mean, we really appreciate it. We appreciate the love, support that you guys constantly are giving us.
Yeah, man. We really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody. Find me in the dark. To this day, no one has been charged in the murders of Doris, Lori, and Michelle. Camp Scott has never reopened its doors, and the memories of stolen innocence still haunt the grounds to this day. A life being taken at any time is a tragedy, but to be taken before life truly begins is an insurmountable tragedy. Children are the definition of purity. Anyone that has the capability of extinguishing that purity is a monster of unimaginable proportions. It takes a community to raise and protect a child, and when that community fails, life as we know it is decimated, never to be mended again. Us here at Find Me in the Dark would like to extend our sincerest condolences to the families and all affected by this horrible crime. May they rest in peace, and may happiness return to the hearts of everyone involved.